Hello, everybody. Thank you all for coming out today. My name is Roman, and today I have the honor and privilege of introing our Indigenous Peoples Day live stream today. It's going to be a discussion of indigenous issues in the South Bay and the sacred land of Juristac. In 2019, Governor Gavin Newsom recognized Indigenous Peoples Day for the first time. That will be Monday. We're doing our events today. So I want to start with I have the great privilege and honor of introducing Amah Mutsun Tribal Band Chair Valentin Lopez. Tribal Chair Lopez is the chairman, one of three historic tribes that are recognized as Ohlone. The Amah Mutsun are comprised of the indigenous descendants forcibly taken to Mission San Juan Bautista and Santa Cruz. Chairman Lopez is also the president of the Amah Mutsun Land Trust, which was established in 2012. He's a Native American advisor to the University of California, Office of the President on issues related to reparations. He is also a Native American advisor to the National Alliance on Mental Illness and the Phoebe Hearst Museum of Anthropology. The Amah Mutsun are currently working to restore their traditional indigenous knowledge regarding land stewardship so they can return to the path of their ancestors. Consequently, the Amah Mutsun are very active in conservation and the protection efforts within their traditional tribal territory. Chairman Lopez is working to restore the Mutsun language and is a traditional Mutsun singer and dancer. Without further ado, I'd like to hand things over to Tribal Chair Lopez himself for a land acknowledgement and a beginning of the discussion.
Thank you very much, Roman. I appreciate that. I first want to give offer prayers and blessings to the Muwekma tribe and the Tamian tribe. The Tamian tribe was the traditional tribe of this territory, and due to the horrible history of the indigenous people of this area, there is no Tamian tribe to speak of today, but there are descendants from the mission times, and today those descendants are represented by Muwekma. I also want to say hello to Jake and to thank him for this invitation this evening. Jake has been a good friend of mine and our tribes for a number of years now. We respect, appreciate, and value that friendship. So thank you, Jake. The Muwekma have a land acknowledgement that they read, and I don't have that with me, so I'll just offer the land acknowledgement as we would. The territory of Santa Clara County was one of the most populated areas in North America. And it's easy to understand why. The resources, the river, the water, the wildlife were just incredible here. It was a wonderful place for our ancestors to raise their family and to fulfill their obligation to Mother Earth to take care. To fulfill their obligation to Creator, to take care of Mother Earth and all living things. I'll be talking about our history in a little while, and you'll find out some about that horrible history. But the land is sacred, and we have a responsibility to restore the sacredness that was lost as a result of that colonizer's history. We have to restore it for the wildlife as well. Today, as you know, a lot of indigenous people, they suffer from diabetes, heart disease, obesity, etc. And a lot of that is due to our diets. Our foods were taken away from us, and we were forced to eat the European foods and to assimilate to their ways of eating. But not only do our people suffer, the wildlife suffers. The plants that they ate, the foods that they ate, are no longer there. When you look at landscapes, 96% of all landscapes are non-native. The plants that are there are not native. And that's historic trauma for the wildlife as well. So for the Land Trust today, we asked and we pray and we ask Creator to let all people recognize the sacredness of the lands and the importance of lands to the culture of Native peoples, but also to the culture of the wildlife, Creator. We ask this, Creator, that you guide us in stewarding and taking care of the lands. Oh, thank you very much. Well, tonight's a fun night because I say that because I was told that I can speak about whatever I want. So you guys are going to hear some things you may not have ever heard before. A lot of people think our history began with the mission, period. And that's, and that's a shame that people don't know who the people are in this territory. We're often referred to as hunters and gatherers. But nothing could be further from the truth. Our people were very effective land managers and land stewards. Our directive from Creator, our sacred covenant, calls on the Amah Mutsun to take care of Mother Earth and all living things. And our ancestors took that directive very serious from Creator. They recognized first and foremost that the lands were sacred. And we had an obligation to maintain that sacredness. We had prayers. We had ceremonies. Our ceremonies, we would have a ceremony each year to ask for balance in the 4 seasons. So we would not have, too serious of droughts and flooding. And then we would have and that the seasons would be predictable so that we can manage the food resources for ourselves and for the wildlife. We also recognize that the Creator made the world perfect, and so we did not want to alter it. We didn't try to change the flow of rivers. We didn't see where plants were and say, well, that plant would look better on that hillside over there, let's move it. That's where that plant chose to be. That's where Creator put that plant. And so we have an obligation to take care of that plant. That's how our ancestors took care of Mother Earth. And we also had ceremonies to call back the salmon when it was during the migration. We understood that the strongest and the most determined, the strongest willed salmon would go up that stream first. And it was important for the survival of that species that those early ones that were going up the stream with the most energy and the strongest and the most determined make that journey. And so we would let the first flow of the salmon go up, and then we would only start hunting salmon after that first 7, 8, 10 days. Then we would start fishing for the salmon to ensure that that species stayed strong and that they were able to spawn, make it to the spawning beds. The migrating geese, we recognize that a favorite and important food for the migrating geese were insects. The insects have protein, and they're important for getting the migrating geese, for them to get their strength back and get their body weight back on, so they can continue their migration. And so whenever I talk in a little bit about our ancestors had a responsibility to take care of the insects, that's just one example of why it was so important. Our people learned when they took care of Mother Earth that the plants, for example, all plants have a responsibility to a full community. Every plant did. The plants had a responsibility to take care of the fungi, to take care of the insects, the birds, the four-legged, and for people. We didn't have monocrops because that's not what the plants were put here. They're put here to take care of that full community. Our people knew the way that our people took care of the plants. They grew very sturdy and very hardy. They developed root systems that went very deep. It wasn't unusual for our grassland, the roots of our grasses, to go down 15 or 20 feet deep. And because they did that, it made it very resistant to drought, to flooding, to fire. And that's going to be important as we address issues related to climate change, how we can recover from climate change. We also the way we took care of the plants also made them very resistant to disease. And as evidence of that, in the 1960s, there was an epidemic in the wine industry, the vineyards, and I believe it started in France. And then from France, it traveled to other countries and eventually went around the world. And people were saying, this is going to be the end of our wine industry. What a disaster. But what they found out is the root system of the California grape was resistant to that disease. And today, the vineyards around the world have the rootstock from the California grape. And that same example applies to many of the nut crops around the world. It has the rootstock of the California nuts. And it's true also for strawberries. Strawberries is a very important industry to California. But the strawberry fields and farms in California and around the world have the rootstock of our California strawberries. That's how our ancestors took care of that land. And we got to get back to that. We have to get back to that. Then came the mission period. And a lot of people think that the missions started as when the missions first crossed over the border in Mexico. But in all honesty, the missions history began with the papal bulls that were issued by Pope Alexander VI in 1453. In 1453, Pope Alexander VI issued a papal bull that said indigenous people are heathens, pagans, and savages. That indigenous people have no soul. And that's a very important one. Because if you don't have a soul, you're not a human being. And if you're not a human being, if they enslave you, if they rape you, if they torture you, if they kill you, it's not a sin. And so there is no consequences, spiritual consequences, for their sins and their crimes and their offenses against the indigenous peoples. The papal bulls also said that all indigenous people are the enemies of Jesus Christ and that we were to be put into perpetual slavery and that our property and our possessions were to be taken from us. That's exactly what happened. There were 4 papal bulls that were issued in about a 50-year period of time. The last one was in 1493, and that's known as the Doctrine of Discovery. The Doctrine of Discovery said that all the Christian European nations should go out and discover the new lands and turn those new lands and make those new lands under the possession of the country that discovered them, and to turn the indigenous people into citizens of their country. Here in California, that means the Spain was to turn us into Spanish citizens, and to turn us and to convert us to the Catholic religion. And it said, this is a brutal one here, that if we did not assimilate, that we were to be killed. As a result of that, indigenous people around the world, millions of people, some say hundreds of millions of indigenous people around the world were killed as a result of that papal bull and that Doctrine of Discovery. The Doctrine of Discovery was actually passed a Supreme Court decision in 1823, Johnson versus McIntosh, confirmed that the Doctrine of Discovery shall be the law of the land for the United States. And that's what set off heading east and try to take over the lands. And that's what started the mission system. They said the missions were brutal. The Indians there were enslaved. They could not leave. When they would capture them, they would send soldiers to forcibly capture them and bring them to the missions. The missions could no longer speak their language. They separated the men from the women from the children so that indigenous knowledge and indigenous ways would not pass on to the children. And they were hoping by taking that, wiping out those memories and that knowledge, that their citizens would accept the Catholic faith, and they would accept the citizenship of that European country to be far superior than anything that their ancestors had. And that was simply not true. During mission times, over 80% of all Indians that were taken to the missions died. In Mission San Juan Bautista alone, over 19,421 Indians died at Mission San Juan Bautista. And that was a number that was reported by the priest at San Juan Bautista. Mission Santa Cruz, and these are the two missions that we descend from, Mission San Juan Bautista and Mission Santa Cruz. Mission Santa Cruz had a life expectancy for the Indians of less than 2 years. It was the most brutal of all missions. In 1809, the Indians there killed the priest, Father Quintana. And I'm going to tell something graphic here. After they killed him, the Indians crushed his testicles. And we always believed and sensed that there was a strong sexual message there. A researcher who's working on Mission Santa Cruz contacted me recently, and he said that he found a reference in a book that said, it was in 1841, that said that the reason the Indians killed the priest was because he was raping the wife of an Indian chief at the mission. And those are holy places, supposedly. I want to get to our current contemporary tribes, so I'm going to go fast here. The Spanish period, what happened during the Spanish times, the Mexican times rather, is a complete changeover of our landscapes. They wanted to encourage citizens from Mexico to come on up into California and to start to populate the state. Their goal of populating the state with Indians just did not work. And so they started bringing people from Mexico, giving them these large land grants, and encouraged them to raise cattle, sheep, pigs, horses. And that's what they did. And and that's exactly what they did. But what they did beyond that, though, is that they saw that our native grasses, they felt that our native grasses weren't as good as the European grasses, their barleys, their alfalfas, their oats. They felt that our native grasses were inferior. And so they started bringing in their grass seeds. And they just started spreading and taking over. Their grasses, because they didn't take care of that community that I talked about earlier, the grasses started growing a lot faster and a lot taller, and they quickly shaded out our native plants. There was no labor force here in California, so they got the Indians and turned them into it was slave labor under the Mexican government as well. And there's a lot of horrible stories there about people trying to run away or about rapes, etc. That was followed by the American period. The American period for a lot of California Indians was the most brutal of all. Governor Peter J. Burnett, the first governor of California in the very first State of the Union, said that there will be a war of extermination against the California Indians. That is to be expected. The California state legislators then passed a bond, one of the very first bonds, treasury bonds by the state of California. And that treasury bond was to pay for the extermination of California Indians. And with that money, they paid bounties for every dead Indian, 25 cents to $5 for every dead Indian. They paid militias to go out to form, and then to go on out and find the Indians and to kill them. And they did that for a period of about 12 years. They did that. California is one of the last places that had government-sanctioned bounties on indigenous people in the world. Right here, the killing of Indians was government-sanctioned. We signed a treaty in 1851 with the federal government. They sent commissioners over to negotiate these treaties, and many tribes signed those treaties. And those treaties were then sent to Washington, D.C. to be ratified. The state of California did not want treaties. They did not want reservations. They wanted extermination. And so they passed a resolution asking the Senate, the U.S. Senate, and the president to not ratify those treaties. And then once that resolution passed, they sent a delegation to lobby against the ratification of the treaties. The president at that time ordered that those treaties be sealed for 50 years. And our treaties were sealed and were never ratified. And that's why there's so many unrecognized tribes in California today. They passed laws that allowed the kidnapping of children. It was illegal and encouraged to kidnap children. It wasn't unusual for them to kill the parents, take the kids, because they did not want them growing up to be Indian. And so they would sell the children. The boys would sell for $150, so on average, and that right there was for a lifetime of labor, slave labor. And the girls would be sold for $300, twice the value of boys. But a lot of times when those Spanish came here and those gold miners came here and a lot of the soldiers came here, they didn't bring their families, their wives, or female companionship or anything like that. It was just, and so they were all alone. And so they started buying little girls for sexual pleasures and sexual reasons. And it's pretty horrible and pretty disgusting. And that whole history of indigenous peoples is that way. And so now, that is why when whenever we take our classes in the fourth grade class and stuff like that, they don't teach this history. They don't teach this history. They say the missions were wonderful, peaceful places, that the fathers were so gentle and kind to the Indians and they treated them like children. They say the Indians came voluntarily, that the Indians came to find a better life or to find agriculture or to find God. And those were all lies. And whenever you took your California history in high school, they didn't talk about the history of the Indians. They didn't. For many years after that period of time, our people lived underground. We said that we were Mexican. We denied we were Indian only because we were afraid of that bounty money, of discrimination, of the hatred that the Indians experienced during that period of time. And it wasn't until the 1960s or 1970s that our people started speaking out. And then our tribe formed together as a tribal council in the 1980s. And then in 1991, we developed a constitution as required by the federal government if we were going to be considered for federal recognition. And so we filled out that, we developed a constitution. And the federal recognition process that they developed is impossible. Only one California tribe has ever been recognized through that federal recognition process, and that was a Timbashaw Shoshone. They were one of the very first tribes to apply. The Timbashaw, by the way, is one of the desert tribes, and that was in 1984. Since that time, many tribes have applied for federal recognition, including Muwekma, and they've been denied. The BIA does not want to recognize any more tribes. It's their responsibility to take care of the tribes that are recognized today, and they feel that by recognizing any additional tribes, they're hurting the current day tribes that they're supposed to be protecting. That's one of the main reasons. In 2003, I was elected to chair. In 2006, the tribal elders came to a tribal council meeting and said, our creation story tells us that it's our responsibility to take care of Mother Earth and all living things, and we have to find a way back to that. That was confusing as all heck to us. I left that meeting just shaking my head, said, how in the world can we do that? Our tribe is extremely poor. The generation above me did not read or write. My grandparents did not read or write. Many of the people at my age did not graduate from high school. How could we afford to live in our territory when we have minimal skills like that? Majority of our people worked in the farms and the ranches. And so we ended up moving to the valley where there was still agricultural work to be had. And our people continue working in agriculture there. But our people were poor, as I said. And so we didn't own an inch of land. We still do not own, as a tribe, an inch of land in our territory. And the elders say we have to find a way to get back to our territory to take care of Mother Earth. And I'm just shaking my head saying, how in the world are we going to do that? But we did what we always do. We prayed. And we asked Creator to help us find a way to fulfill our obligation to Creator to take care of Mother Earth and all living things. In 2006, we got a call from the superintendent. Shortly after we started praying, we got a call from the superintendent of Pinnacles National Park. And he had just transferred in. And he had transferred in from a park where he had a great relationship with the tribe, and he wanted to do the same thing at Pinnacles. And so he asked us to, to come on into the park and to have a co-say and to help manage the park and to help with the interpretation and to talk about how the native plants are being taken care of and stewarded, et cetera. And we were very interested in that because of what our elders told us. But at the same time, we were afraid of the embarrassment that would bring to us because we had lost so much of our knowledge. So much of our knowledge that they say, well, is this plant here a food plant or a medicine plant, basket tree? What do you use that plant for? We had to say, we don't know. They say, well, do you have a song for the bear? We don't know. How do you say this? How do you say this in your language? We don't know. We had lost all that knowledge. Those 3 periods of brutal colonization, they wanted to destroy our culture, our spirituality, our humanity, our dignity. And they, completely, they tried to destroy us completely. And they nearly did. We went back to council and talked about that issue of the embarrassment and saying, what are we going to do? We don't have this knowledge. And then the elders said, we have to recognize that what happened to us wasn't our fault. It wasn't our fault. But we also have to recognize that we have an obligation to Creator, to take care of Mother Earth and all living things, and we must find a way. From that point on, we went into Pinnacles, and then state parks heard what we were doing, and we went into state parks. Now we're at the Bureau of Land Management, BLM. And we also work closely with Mid-Peninsula Open Space District. We work with the Open Space District of Santa Clara Valley, I believe is the right name. The Open Space Authority, rather. And we work with we work with a lot of others, Greenfoot Hills and Post, and a lot of others in the in the conservation area, to get access to our lands. And that access allows us to have ceremony, allows us to protect our sacred and culturally sensitive sites, and allows us to have tribal gatherings and to have education of our members so we can relearn that knowledge, and education of the public, because we feel it's important for that public to learn the indigenous ways of land stewardship if we are going to survive climate change. We know that to be absolute truth. We also did research to help restore the knowledge, to learn what those landscapes look like, to learn exactly what plants were there, so we can restore that landscape to a certain area. We're also working to restore our tradition of using fire. Fire is a very important management tool. Fire was a gift to our tribe from Creator. That fire allowed us to have heat, to have light, to be able to cook our foods. It was very important for our spirituality. When we pray, when we hold ceremony, the fire is at the center of our prayers and the center of our ceremony. And that is so important at fire. But then fire is also very important for landscapes. Our people would look at a landscape and break it into 6, 7, 8 different segments and burn one segment a year, and then go back and start all over. And that keeps those tremendous fuel loads down. And whenever you have a fire at that frequency, the fire is very low intensity. It doesn't get hot like that, like the other fires. It doesn't get that hot. And it just creeps along the ground. At the same time, it has a lot of other benefits as well. A lot of the seed plants, they need fire and heat to germinate. And so the fires help germinate the seed plants, and you get a great abundance of seeds after the 1 year after the fire. And that's important for the birds, for other seeding animals, it's important for that plant for the future, to perpetuate itself, and it's important for our tribe because seasonally our diets would be 40% seed. There's a lot of different ways that are, and there's a lot of other ways. Because of time, I'm going to stop there. I do want to say about fire. In the week of November 16th, 17th, and 18th, we're not exactly sure, but our tribe is offering a symposium on indigenous burning and indigenous fire. And there we're going to talk about what indigenous burning is, how, what our ancestors did traditionally, and what evidence is there. A UC Berkeley archaeologist, the head of the archaeology department at UC Berkeley is going to talk about what the archaeological records show about indigenous burning. And you'll see that it has the evidence that our people would burn every 5, 6, 7 years. And that kept all those horrendous fires down. If we were doing the indigenous burning today, those fires that just happened in the Santa Cruz Mountains would not have happened. We're also going to have, we belong to the California Tribal Fire Council. And there we have many tribes working together to restore fires to the landscape for the good of the environment, but also to address the issues of those catastrophic fires. And then we're going to have one of the top fire scientists from UC Berkeley, Scott Stevens. He's going to talk about fire and how he is convinced now that indigenous burning is what the state of California should be doing. And so we'll try and get an invitation to everyone on this here today and invite you to join us. We have been here for thousands of years, and we will be here until the last sunrise. And with your help, we can succeed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Val. I appreciate it. November 16th is my birthday, so an awesome week to join in that symposium and learn a little bit more as well. So, as always, I appreciate you coming on. Wherever I extend an invitation, you are there. I think what you've been able to cover in short 35 minutes, it means a lot because, as you mentioned, this is not talked about in our history of California classes. There are not very many opportunities for people to really understand what has happened and how we got here. And so thank you again. I know Roman has a plan for the next step. I think Lou's here. Hopefully we can get him on and we'll go into a little bit more about the current projects you guys are working on.
That's really good. And by the way, what Lou talks about is Juristac, and that's a top priority to our tribe. I was going to try and remember to give an introduction to that, and I didn't. But what Lou's going to talk about Juristac, that's an absolute top priority for our tribe. Thank you, Jake.
Yeah, thank you. Do we have Lou? Maybe without some video. Lou, can you hear us? Trying to unmute you. I think Roman might be able to give him a call on his phone and bug him. I'm getting you can't unmute your guest because they have chosen to mute themselves. So Lou, if you can hear us, you got to unmute yourself.
Well, I'll introduce Juristac for a minute or two, and then when
Perfect.
Lou comes on, he'll take over. How's that?
Yeah, that would be great, Val. Let's make that happen while we get him on the phone. So go ahead.
Okay. Well, Juristac is known today on the county maps and stuff as Sergeant Ranch. And Sergeant Ranch is at the southern end of Gilroy. It's at the very bottom of the Santa Cruz Mountains. You cross Highway 129, which is known as the Chitlin Pass. When you cross that road, now you're into the Gavilan Range. And so, and Juristac for ours translates to the place of the big head. And the big head, our big head ceremonies were the most important ceremonies of our tribe. And for thousands and thousands of years, our people held the big head dances. And people would come from as far away as Chumash territory, from Yosemite, from the Pomo territory, to our territory to participate in our big head ceremonies. And then, of course, came the horrible times of our brutal history with the missions, Mexican and American period. And our people had not been on that land since 1860s. But that is still our most sacred site. The spirituality of that land is still there, and it's waiting for us. The wildlife are waiting for us. The water and the springs are waiting for us to return. And now, in 2015, a group of investors bought Sergeant Ranch out of a bankruptcy proceedings. And that group of investors, what they do is they buy distressed property, try and monetize it, and then flip it and sell it. And just try to make as many millions as they can, as quickly as they can. And that's what they're doing. That's exactly what they're doing. And so now we brought together coalitions to fight against that. And I think this is a good place for you to take over, Lou. Would you agree?
Sure, Val.
Okay,
And
thank you.
thank you, Tribal Chair Lopez. My name is Lou Charamante. I helped start a group called South Bay Indigenous Solidarity. We're one of 50 groups that's actually working to support the Amah Mutsun tribal band in order to protect Juristac, their most sacred ceremonial site. South Bay Indigenous Solidarity itself is a multi-ethnic group, and generally we support the efforts, Indigenous-led efforts to promote human rights, restore Indigenous land stewardship, and to preserve threatened cultural burial and sacred sites. And to put the effort to protect Juristac in particular focus, I'm here to present some graphics and an outline of what our coalition is helping the tribal band do on this issue. So I'm not sure, Roman, do you have those graphics available?
I know he's got them, so we'll give him just a second here to pull those up, and then we'll get you started, Lou. Thank you so much. Glad you can make it.
Glad to be here, Jake. All right. So first, a couple of maps showing the cultural context that Tribal Chair Lopez so eloquently described. If you're curious as to how our local tribes fit into the larger tribal framework of Native California, here's a much too simplified map. In the next map, which focuses on the Ohlone/Costanoan, for lack of a better word, cultural area, you can see how the different language families are divided here, and where Mutsun is centrally located, it's Hearth, and Awaswas, located around the north part of Monterey Bay. That's, of course, where the people taken to Mission Santa Cruz were taken from. And notice in this map here where Gilroy is. You'll see it's really at the heart of Mutsun territory, of the Mutsun Hearth. And if we go to the next slide, you'll see exactly where this proposed open pit mine or quarry is supposed to be. Again, we have Gilroy there. You can see it's south of Gilroy, very close to the county line. And on the next slide, we have an oblique aerial photo that gives a better idea of Juristac's location. It really is at the tail of the Santa Cruz Mountains. You can see the ridge line in the middle there. You can see Watsonville, Santa Cruz to the upper left, San Jose to the upper right. So this photo is looking over Highway 101 into Juristac / Sergeant Ranch, sort of looking at a angle towards the northwest. Now, let's see. Oh yes, and as you can see, the area where the proposed quarry would be located is relatively pristine, though other parts of the land have been impacted by oil production that's been going on for over a century. And on the next slide is an overhead view of the proposed mine, which will consist of 4 pits. And these pits will basically decimate 4 sacred hills. And the pits will be connected via conveyor belts and roads. An elevation map on the next slide gives some indication of the hundreds of feet each of these pits will dig into the earth. And a horizontal elevation map, which we'll see on the next slide, does an even better job. Basically, 40 to 50 million tons of sand and gravel will be removed over a 30-year period. Every day, 76,000 gallons of groundwater will have to be withdrawn from a sensitive aquifer to wash this gravel. 200 to 800 daily truck trips would be needed to remove materials from the site. And again, the conditional use permit for this site would allow for the quarry to operate over a 30-year period. On the next slide, you can see an existing quarry, which is located in Monterey County. It's a large single pit, but notice on the next slide where that same pit can be seen as a large pink blob in the lower left-hand corner. You can get a relative idea of the size of the new pits that are being proposed for Juristac, for Sergeant Ranch, which are those gray pits, the 4 areas that are outlined to the right of the image. And the 5th area is actually the processing plant area. But the other 4 outlines are the 4 pits, which would be dug in stages. On the next slide is an overview of Sgt Creek, the biology of which would be decimated by the proposed mine. According to environmental biologist Stuart Weiss, there really will be no way for the creek in this area to recover. It provides a very unique habitat for, in particular, the California red-legged frog. And on the next slide, there's a picture of Tar Creek, which, even though it isn't in the exact project area of the quarry, the aquifer in the area can be affected by the massive amounts of groundwater that will be removed on a daily basis. On the next slide, you'll see an example of a cultural resource, a bedrock mortar that was found near the area. Aside from the cultural resources, though, of course, with ancient village sites being in the area, it's impossible to tell if there are any cultural resources that might be impacted by the development or not until a study is done. And that's partly why an environmental impact report study is being done at the moment. But aside from these cultural resources, Juristac is also the heart of the only wildlife corridor to connect the Santa Cruz, Diablo, and Gavilan mountain ranges. And on the next slide, you'll see an overall, this is sort of a regional map showing wildlife core areas, which are the darker green areas, and the corridors connecting them to a lighter green. If we move to the next slide, which focuses on Juristac itself, you'll notice that there's a corridor connecting the Santa Cruz Mountains to the Gavilan Range and another one connecting it to the Diablo Range. And there are crossings underneath Highway 101 that allow that corridor between Juristac and the Diablo Range to exist. But putting a quarry right in the middle of that is definitely not going to be friendly towards the endangered and threatened species that utilize that corridor, including the California puma. And on the next slide, you'll see the California red-legged frog, which habitat in Sgt Creek might be, or is likely to be heavily impacted by the development of the quarry. And on the slide after that, we have an example of the California tiger salamander, which is another threatened species that lives in the vicinity. And then we should have, after this, a slide that shows some, yes. So what we're doing, what the outreach groups are doing is, one of the things we're doing is, of course, collecting signatures. This is actually an example of a paper petition. We aren't handing around many of those right now, but you can go to www.protectjuristac.org in order to fill out the online petition. There are other steps that you as a resident of the area can also take in order to help preserve and protect Juristac. And hopefully the PDF is available for view on the next slide. Lists some of the, maybe not. All right, let me bring up mine and all of that. Okay, so first off, you can sign and share the petition to protect Juristac. Secondly, you can send a letter to the County of Santa Clara on behalf of your organization, your faith community, yourself, expressing opposition to the proposed mining at Juristac. Contact information for the Board of Supervisors and Planning Commission can be found at protectjuristac.org, and sample letters can be found there as well. This is both an issue of human rights, taking indigenous religion seriously and putting it at the same level that we consider all other religions, the same level of respect. And it's also an issue of the environment. So you can hit it from both angles when you're writing to the county. Thirdly, you can arrange for your Santa Clara County-based organization to sign onto the Statement of Opposition. And there is a resource guide which is available on the Protect Juristac website, and we have an image of it here right now. That's actually what I'm reading from at the moment. And so it has the various addresses: protectjuristac.org, Mutsun.org, which is the tribe's website, the Mutsun Land Trust website. And the fourth thing you can do, so 3 things we talked about was petition, sign the petition, send a letter, and it doesn't have to be a long letter, it can be very short too. Any letter helps. Arrange for your organization to sign the Statement of Opposition. Fourth, you can contact your local elected officials, ask them to support the preservation of Juristac. You can consider helping one of our organizations work to get your town or city council to pass a resolution to protect Juristac. Morgan Hill and Santa Cruz have already done this. So has the Democratic Party of Santa Clara County, Santa Cruz County, and Region 7 of the State Democratic Party. Follow and share posts from Protect Juristac on both Instagram and Facebook. Use the Teaching Juristac curriculum if you're an educator, and this can be found at protectjuristac.org. This is a great issue to bring into the classroom for basically any class from grade school through college. And 7, pass a resolution at your school, church, organization, or club supporting protecting Juristac. So, and just so you're aware of how this this whole situation is set up right now. Sorry, my life went off in the car. So basically, the approval process for this quarry is such that the Debt Acquisition Company of America, doing business as Sargent Ranch, is submitting a proposal for the Sargent Quarry project to the Santa Clara County Planning Department. Santa Clara County Planning Commission staff are preparing a lengthy draft environmental impact report to analyze the impacts of this quarry, both the impacts on the natural environment and the cultural environment. Once we aren't expecting this report to come out until January 2021. Once the draft environmental impact report is published, a public comment period is open in which letters are sent in critiquing the proposed project and the analysis and findings of the draft environmental impact report. A public hearing will take place during the comment period. So especially if you or anyone you know has any specialty in biology, in biological sciences, and anthropology, in any of the sciences that the draft environmental impact report might touch on, your comment during that period can be very useful. Once the Planning Commission staff close the comment period to take time and review and respond to all the comments and incorporate them into a final environmental impact report, FEIR. The FEIR is brought to the Planning Commission, which will vote on whether to certify the FEIR and whether to issue a conditional use permit for Sargent Quarry project. Most likely, this decision will be appealed to the Santa Clara County Board of Supervisors, and the Board of Supervisors will take up the issue and make a final decision on whether to grant or deny the conditional use permit. So, influencing the supervisors by letting them know your voice is the most important key in influencing the outcome of this issue. And of course, you can learn more at protectjuristac.org. There's a YouTube playlist for Protect Juristac, and also check out local groups like South Bay Indigenous Solidarity in the San Jose area, North County, Friends of Juristac in Santa Cruz, South County for Protecting Juristac in South County, Calendar for Juristac in Watsonville, and many others. But we have meetings on a monthly basis, and we'd be happy to work with you. Our organization also is working on several other projects as well, which I might give a word to a little later. But as far as Juristac, this should be a good outline for you to start from. Val? Or Jake?
Thank you very much, Lou and Val. Again, I appreciate you guys taking the time to come on. It is really important work that you're both doing. If I can add you both to the stream and say thank you. It's been a long time you guys have been working on this. You know, Val, incredible. I know you, as I said earlier, every time I bug you to come, give a pitch, and educate our community, you're there. I know you put your heart and into all of this, and couldn't be more grateful that you guys had the opportunity to join us today. Indigenous Peoples Day is Monday, but we should be fighting these battles and educating our community every opportunity that we can. So again, thank you both.
Thank you very much, Jake.
Yeah. If there's any closing words you guys want to have, then we'll let everybody enjoy their Saturday night and hopefully get up and make some awesome change with their Sunday. Hopefully get involved in some way in their community and hopefully push some of these important issues forward. So thoughts, Lou, Val, to close us?
People have been here for 15, 20,000 years. We're still here. Please don't forget that. Please learn the truth and demand that the truth be told. And we thank you, and best wishes, Jake. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good night.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Good night now.